Hi folks, this is Tara the Homestead Hopeful. One thing I've been thinking about, and yes, stressing about, is how can I grow food if the crap hits the fan when I don't own any property? I currently live in an apartment. We're saving up for a homestead, but it's going to take a long time on our tight budget. In the meantime, what if SHTF comes along right now, before we've bought our homestead? I've come up with a list of things I plan to do, or I think other people could do, if something catastrophic happens and the end of the world as we know it truly becomes a reality. Growing on property you don't own comes with its own set of challenges. You won't be there to guard it, so it could quickly become a target for thieves. If it's public property, local residents may even claim they have a right to whatever's grown there because their taxes paid for that land. And honestly, that's fair enough. But you could also make the counterclaim that you bought the seeds and you did the work of planting it, and if they want some, they should at least help you work the garden. Getting people in your community involved will benefit everyone, including you. You'll have help with the work, help defending it, and fewer hungry people who might turn on you and try to steal from your family or hurt you. Nothing is ever going to be perfect if the crap hits the fan. We just have to make do the best we can with the situation we're handed. And if you don't own property, you'll have to find ways to deal with the challenges that come along with borrowing land for gardening. Also, keep in mind that most of these are technically illegal, but in a WROL scenario, that is, a world without rule of law, there won't exactly be a whole lot of people around to tell you not to, and those that are will be too busy trying to rein in looters and other dangerous criminals. It's up to you if you choose to take a chance on some of these. Number 1, family or friends. The absolute best place to start a garden in SHTF is in the yards of family and friends. People who would otherwise never want their pristine lawns marred by ugly gardens will suddenly be all too happy for you to dig up their yards and plant food. For a portion of the crops, of course. The biggest benefit of planting in the yards of people you know is that they'll have a stake in the success of your garden and will be likely to defend it when you're not there. And they may even be willing to help water it, weed it, and pick pests off the plants. The drawback, of course, is that you'll have to share the harvest with the owner of the land. But if they're friends and family, that shouldn't be too much of a problem now, should it? Sharing is caring. I'm very fortunate to have land in the family that I could access if things go south. My family owns a total of about 100 acres, with 45 mainly wooded acres, and a house that one family member lives on, and 55 wooded acres with a creek that no one lives on just a couple miles down the road. I live about 20 minutes from there, though, so getting that far is, if something truly catastrophic happened with small kids and gear in tow, might be problematic. And aside from being allowed to plant a small garden near the house, I don't have access to this for gardening during peaceful times. Plus, clearing the land for planting would be time-consuming and difficult to do by hand. Still, it is an option for my family, and it's our plan for bugging out if something happens that doesn't require us to evacuate the whole area. It's better than staying indefinitely in an apartment where other residents will see us and our stockpile as targets. Number 2, churches. If you don't have any friends or family nearby, another great place to start a garden is at a church. Many churches have huge lawns or even fields. I have one near me that has a sporting field well over an acre, and it's only a 5-minute walk. I personally plan to plant there if I can't make it to our bug-out location on my family's land. Other churches may have smaller plots of land, but still large enough for a decent garden. If you can get in touch with the pastor of the church, you could even ask for their help. You can get him to see if anyone else has any seeds or tools they could bring to the church and start a garden that the whole congregation could get involved with. One big benefit of having a garden at a church is that there will be people in and out on a regular basis if they're still having services, and many churches probably would, since people tend to flock to God even more during troubled times, and this would discourage thieves. Plus, many churches may open their doors to the displaced in a crisis, and this could mean having round-the-clock guards to watch over the crops. Number 3, public parks and national parks. Public parks are the scene of what is known as guerrilla gardening fairly often. People have been known to go rogue and throw seed bombs over fences, or plant herbs or fruit trees on public land. For the most part, as long as these plants aren't intrusive, they're generally left alone, but if they're in grassy areas that are mowed often, they won't last long. However, public parks are probably not going to be taken care of in SHTF, so they're not going to be mowed. In fact, they probably won't even be visited that often anymore because all the joggers and families with children who frequent them will be too busy trying to figure out how to survive in a catastrophe, unless a lot of them become homeless and decide to make the park their home. You can plant fruit and nut trees along the banks of lakes and rivers, and herbs and vegetables in grassy areas. And if you plant inconspicuous varieties, many will probably remain untouched by the few visitors that come along because they'll just think they're inedible weeds. National parks are also good options, although they may be heavily populated with people looking to forage food or hunt or camping if they've become displaced. They're usually heavily wooded, but many times they have a lot of wide open space as well, so if you have one nearby, you could give this one a try. Number 4, sporting fields. Let's face it, sports won't be much of a thing if the crap hits the fan. Most people will be too busy trying to survive to worry about playing sports. This means fields all over the place will be just sitting there waiting to be used. There are football fields, baseball fields, soccer fields all over the country. They're found at elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, parks. There's probably one within a reasonable walking distance of you right now, and you may not even realize it. Now, the soil in these fields will be pretty compacted considering people are running on them all the time. And of course the ones with AstroTurf will require removal before the soil can be used. But if you have a large flat field with virtually no weeds or brush to contend with, and the soil should be in fairly decent condition since nothing but grass has been growing there for a while. Number 5, Powerline easements. One option for that most people probably wouldn't think of would be the land underneath power lines. In my area, we have huge swaths of land that are kept free of trees and brush underneath the power lines, and the land is just sitting there unused. Even in peaceful times, I've wished I could grow food there. But the thing is, the power companies or local governments generally keep these places mowed, and the vast majority of the time an individual actually owns the property and is basically forced to let the utility company use it for the power lines. But if the crap hits the fan, there may not be any electricity anymore, at least not for a while, and whoever owns that land probably isn't going to use it for farming. So if you can find the owner, try to talk to them about using the property and splitting the crops with them. If you can't, try planting a few things there as a test. If everything goes smoothly, plant a little more, and if you don't find the crops destroyed or stolen, you can probably assume it's relatively safe to plant there. Just be careful about trespassing on someone's property. Some landowners shoot first and ask questions later, even during times of peace, and they will probably be even more trigger happy in WROL. Number 6, malls and shopping centers. Malls and shopping centers often have a good amount of grass sitting untended and unused, and once they're looted of everything of value, there probably won't be much foot traffic anymore. If you can find empty lots behind these malls and shopping centers, it would be an even better option because fewer people would see the garden and be tempted to take from it. Number 7, roadway and highway medians and shoulders. This one is definitely one of the least favorable places to grow, given how easy it would be for passersby to clear the food out, but if it's the only thing near you, it'll do. Lots of roads and highways have medians or shoulders that have decent soil just sitting there waiting to be planted. There may be toxic chemicals in the soil from the countless cars and trucks that have passed by for years, and anyone traveling on the roads can spot the produce easily, but you can mitigate this somewhat by planting inconspicuous varieties that most people wouldn't recognize and might think are just weeds. After all, weeds will quickly take over in SHTF. Number 8, public buildings. Many public buildings have huge lawns, especially courthouses and libraries. Such places would be great options since you'd likely have a constant flow of visitors in and out, which would discourage many people from taking the produce without permission. Granted, a lot of people will be hungry, so it won't matter to them too much, but not too many people would steal from a courthouse, jail, or police station unless they were truly desperate. Other options would be hospitals, airports, train stations, bus stations, and other major government and local establishments. Number 9, abandoned venues. Even now, there are thousands upon thousands of abandoned venues just sitting out there waiting to be used for something. A quick search on YouTube will reveal dozens of channels that specialize in visiting abandoned places like old hospitals that have been closed for years and never demolished, abandoned theme parks, old baseball stadiums, old drive-in movie theaters, abandoned malls. The list goes on and on. They're everywhere. The thing is, planting in these places during peaceful times could go one of two ways. Either you get away with it because few people ever go there and nobody will even care about your tomato plants and carrots if they do see them, or you'll get arrested for trespassing because the place is patrolled often. A lot of times they do have police patrolling pretty often because, a lot of people come in and vandalize the place or take drugs in or have teenagers come in and have parties. So, right now it's not really good to do that kind of thing because you might get in a lot of trouble. But during SHTF, those places aren't likely to be patrolled anymore. And since they're often fenced, they have very little of value, and most people aren't going to pay them any attention when they're worried about survival. This makes them a really great option. In order to find these places, you'll need the internet, so it's a good idea to start making a list of these locations and mapping out walking routes to them now before things get bad, because finding them after SHTF will be difficult if not impossible. Just look up abandoned places in your state and start making a list and keeping paper records of their locations and directions. Number 10, golf courses. Most golf courses obviously won't be in operation in a total SHTF situation, but a lot of them have wide, flat areas devoid of trees that could block sun from your crops, so they're ideal for planting. Golf courses also typically spread fertilizer out to make their grass greener, so that could be beneficial too. But one thing to note is that they do often use herbicides to keep weeds out of the grass, so that could affect the crops. That's why this option is at the bottom of the list instead of the top. But they still shouldn't be overlooked since there's just so much open space available. And there's usually water sources nearby as well, since most of them have water traps in the form of small ponds that could be used to water plants. One of the keys to making this scenario work, that is planting on land you don't own in SHTF, is to plant inconspicuous plant varieties. I'm working on a video in which I'll talk about some of the different plant varieties you can choose in order to keep your garden hidden in plain sight. So be sure you're subscribed to my channel and you ring that little notification bell so you don't miss it. This is Tara, the Homestead Hopeful, saying stay prepared, stay safe, and stay hopeful.